N2 and N3, and business languages. N3. For NCV, levels 2 to 4, there were a total, N2, N3, and N4 put together, of 80,661 candidates that wrote the exam for N2, NCV, N2 to 4. There were 260 subjects altogether that were presented to Umalusi for standardization. And raw marks were accepted for 149 of those, which means 57.3%. Downward shifts were affected on 32 subjects and upward shifts on 78 subjects. One subject was standardized provisionally because it required further investigation and approval by Umalusi. I'm pleased to say that for the NCV examinations, again, there were no systemic irregularities, and the Umalusi Council approves the release of the results of NCV levels 2, 3, and 4 examinations. The D8 is required to block the results of centres or candidates implicated in irregularities, pending the outcome of further investigation, and block the results of the implicated centres that did not submit ICAS evidence or did not meet the ICAS or ISAT requirements. There were also 7 unaccredited centres, and the D8 is required to block the results and to submit a report to Umalusi to explain why these
All right, we've lost the feed there, but we'll certainly get it for you. But just an update then, of course, that's the Umalusi briefing the media about the release of the matric results, which of course we are expecting to happen next week, Tuesday on the 7th. So far, no irregularities. The Umalusi Council says that it approves the releasing of those results. There were, however, 7 unaccredited centres, and of course Umalusi is waiting for a report on that as to what happened there. We'll get you more information. Let's just work on those gremlins we seem to have in the studio. All right, more news after this.
stringent timelines to deliver the best for the country. I would also like to thank the members of the Assessment Standards Committee under the leadership of Professor Yunus Balam for a job well done. On behalf of the Umalusi Council, I wish to extend our hearty congratulations to all the learners who have done well in their examinations. A warm congratulations also to their teachers and their parents and guardians and all those who have supported these learners in their studies. To those who have not been successful, there is another chance for you this year. So please do not give up. Work hard, and we are sure that you will do better in the coming year. We wish you all the best for 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Baldwin. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now open the floor for questions. I will take the first round of questions. You just indicate your name and the media house that you represent as you ask your question. Thank you very much. Man, you are noted. Man in front, and then at the back in that order. No.
Thank you. I note, I think as Dr. Rakometsi said, there's a drop of about 3,000 candidates from last year. Were you able to determine why?
media briefing, we could make those numbers available. We are not having the numbers here with us. They are in our offices, but we could make those available after this media briefing. Prof. Volmink has commented, and I think he may want to comment again, about the quality of gateway subjects in our country. Except for mathematics, as Prof has indicated, all other gateway subjects are improving, and that is something that the country has to celebrate. It shows that a lot of effort has been put in these gateway subjects. However, we need to say something has to be done for mathematics, some extra effort has to be employed in mathematics in particular, because for our economy to grow, in technical areas, in areas of engineering, medicine, commerce, and many other fields related to mathematics, we have to actually give a push to the subject. So the appeal is only for mathematics as a gateway subject to be given extra attention. As for the rest, it seems that like we are in the right direction, we are in the right trajectory. I think I've covered all the questions, even the one of the block results and those centers that are unaccredited. We can give the numbers after the media briefing.
Thank you, Dr. Rakometsi. What I have here in front of me is the acts of dishonesty per province. But some of them had been resolved. So I can tell you, for example, and we have it per province. If I start with the Eastern Cape, there were, for acts of dishonesty, 188, of which 24 cases affecting 28 candidates were resolved. But I can't give you, as Dr. Rakometsi has said, a global. We have a report. We can go through there, and we keep a tally of how many were originally reported as acts of dishonesty and how many were resolved after investigation. I have that per province. And then why no leakages? I agree with Dr. Rakometsi that I believe in the maturing system, our vigilance. One of the things that happens, it is a system that has learned. It's a learning organization. And in a learning organization, you learn from your successes as well as your mistakes. And you then put in place certain measures that is drawn from your learnings. And one of them is to heighten the vigilance. And things such as group copying had disappeared as a result of that. So for mathematics, I think Dr. Rakometsi has also covered that. I think that it's hard, a lot of efforts, and I think there was a question from Eyewitness News also about, no, it was ENCA, sorry. ENCA was asking about the gateway subjects. It is the case that that the Department of Basic Education has given a lot of attention and has presented a report to Umalusi, a qualitative report of all the interventions it made, not just at the end of the year, but throughout the year, throughout the country. And one has to therefore make a link between those interventions and the fact that in most of the gateway subjects, we could leave the results just as raw. There was no need to adjust upwards or downwards. And it shows an upward trend in the gateway subjects, which signals a set of strong results for the country. We are encouraged by that. And it shows the value of interventions. And we want to commend the DBE for that. For mathematics, it is my view, personally. And I share that with some members of Umalusi. Umalusi doesn't have a position on that, and maybe in future it will. But it is my view, and I share that, as I said, with others, that the way mathematics is being taught is simply going over old exam papers. And so that you begin to see most of the problems as routine problems. So when you're given a non-routine problem, you have difficulty in dealing with it. So problem solving has got to do with the ability to deal with non-routine problems. I haven't seen that before, but I know the general approach. And that is the teaching that needs to come. And for that, we need to help teachers to teach mathematics differently.
Thank you. I will now open the floor for the second round of questions. The gentleman in the red T-shirt, noted. Anybody else? Okay.
Robinson from Power News. I have a question on the issue of adjustments. I think this would suggest that these exams, the need for adjustment to be made would suggest that these exams are either too hard or too simple, so to say. So in terms of the people who are setting these, exams, are they doing the right work? Who's involved in that process? And why, if year to year we have to make these adjustments, it means there's something wrong with the people who are setting these exams. And secondly, on the issue of the improvement marked on the geography subject. I remember last year there were even talks about phasing out the subject because of the consistent poor performance. What is it that has been done differently, and can't we use what has been done with the subject such as maths? Sorry. The last question is about the upward adjustment on maths in the IEB assessment. I think last year we also had an upward adjustment and it caused an uproar. In the IEB, is there anything wrong that they're doing that perhaps, as Umalusi would suggest, they do?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's say there is another question at the back.
Thank you. My name is Edward Makareta. Still on the IEB. The IEB has been adjusted, but Sakari has been left raw as it is. What is the reason for that?
Thank you. Okay. I will see your answer.
Thank you very much. Robinson, you understand standardization. I appreciate that. The way you summarize why we standardize upwards and downwards shows that you have a full appreciation of standardization as a tool we use to quality assure examination. That is appreciated. The papers are set by highly qualified people, highly qualified people with extensive experience in those subjects. However, we should note that highly qualified as they may be, they are human beings. And they may think that they pitched the paper at the right level of difficulty or cognitive level, only to find that there's been an error of judgment on their part. They are panels, they are not individuals, but there is also a possibility of a human error as they set the papers. One other thing that you should note is that these questions in our country are not field tested, and that we are only able to identify the problems once the paper is written. And that is why we have to do these adjustments. So we can't blame the examiners, they're experts, and we respect their expertise in those fields. When it comes to geography improvement can be attributed to the interventions that the department has implemented. And I don't have recollections of a statement made by the department that they're going to phase out geography. I don't remember that. It was never the case that geography is going to be phased out. However, when the results improve, it shows that there's been an extra effort. Either the textbooks were delivered on time, there have been extra subject advisors, the teachers were taken for workshops, the learners were taken to camps. That is what would account for an improvement in the results. The uproar that happened with the upward adjustment of mathematics for the IEB last year was unnecessary. It was unnecessary. And let me give you, a classical example of what is happening here. When we look at the IEB, we look at the IEB independent of Sakai and DBE. When I go to Cape Town, I use the map of Cape Town. to navigate my space there. I don't use the map of Durban because I'll get lost. In the same way, when you look at the mathematics results of the IEB, you look at them independent of the rest. And you don't look at who IEB is, you look at the trends, you look at the motivation, you look at the norm that has been established by the IEB over the past 5 years. And you look also at the qualitative reports from the examiners and the moderators. And what we also do with our researchers, what is called post-exam analysis. That's all you do. And as you do the adjustments of the IEB, you do them, you don't even look at what you did with the DBE and vice versa. So that comparison, colleagues, is unfortunate, it's not supposed to happen, it's not educationally sound, we don't encourage it in the system. I think that also answers the last question about Sakai and IB. We don't do such a comparison. Each and every assessment body's results are looked independent of the rest of the others. Prof?
Yes. Maybe I'll just say about geography. The question was, what was done differently this year? Well, last year it was pointed out that part of the problem had to do with technical matters, such as incorrect maps, and others had to do with new content and or with alignment with the CAPS guidelines. And so those things have been addressed. In addition, geography was also the focus of some attention by the DBE in terms of its interventions. So one has to expect a natural growth. And if the Assessment Standards Committee cannot find any source of variation other than an improvement in the actual learner performance, then it leaves it as raw. So the paper wasn't easier, it was at the normal standard, and everything else checked out. So I'm not going to go over again the arguments, but it applies to both the IEB question as well as adjustments in general. I think your concern was when we do adjustments, you know, are we doing the right thing? And I think the only thing I want to point out is that given, and I don't want to go over the points that was made by Dr. Rakometsi, but given the complex nature of the various stages that Dr. Rakometsi had pointed out of the process of standardization, the process of quality assurance, it can lead to misinterpretation, especially if one observes only one of the stages outlined by Dr. Rakometsi in isolation of the others. So you can't just focus on the final stage. You have to look at from the setting of the exam to what we announced today, by way of standardization. And it's not an exact science. And yes, there may be, it's a human judgment. It's not done by a computer. The computer does make a suggestion on our sheet that we are given. It says the computer suggests this, but there are 20 odd people who sit around the table and say, do we agree or don't we agree? What other factors can we take into account? And in the end, it's a consensus decision. I hope that helps. The only other thing is with the IB is that we apply, as Dr. Rakometsi has said, the same reasoning to each and every subject. It doesn't matter whether it's IB, Sakai, or anybody else. And that also, it's a commendation for an exam if the results are left as raw. So it is not something bad. So the fact that the IEB exam had to be adjusted upwards makes a different statement when I say for the DBE it was left as raw. It's a different statement. But they both had to go through the scrutiny of the standardization process. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. I will take another round of questions, probably the last round. Thank you, Takwana. We'll start with you. Anybody else? Robinson? Jane, and then somebody else who may want to take the last bite. Okay. Thank you. Takwana?
Thank you. There have been concerns that having the different assessment bodies create perceptions that some are better than others, and so as a result, even admission to institutions of higher learning is deceived by which assessing body a student has gone through. Would you agree with these concerns or disagree?
Yeah, my question is similar to, would you recommend that we have one assessment body so that we never have to deal with issues of people feeling that other assessment bodies are given preferential treatment in terms of, I mean, when adjustments have to be made? And the second question is about, you said that you had little protests which disrupted the right to exams. But did you factor in, school violence that we had, or discussed, we had a lot of stabbings, and this may have affected those rights and to some extent the outcome.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So maybe I should just take the last question and then address the questions about the different assessment bodies. In the case of the Northwest Province, it was not the case that the exams were disrupted by the protest actions, but it threatened it. And so proactively, the department made alternative arrangements. So they moved the learners from where the protest actions were taking place to an alternative place so that they can write the exam undisturbed. But yes, I agree, there's a culture of violence in our schools that needs to be addressed. But even though as horrible as they are, for Umalusi, what we have to decide is, has it affected systemically across the system the quality and the integrity of the exams? That's the only judgment. So the Department of Basic Education will attend to this issue. It's not Umalusi's job. What we have to say is, did it affect the exams or not? And there's no evidence that the isolated and tragic events that it led to the killing of students, stabbing of others, and attacking of others, there's no evidence that it affected systemically the results. As far as the question is concerned, is one assessment body regarded as superior or inferior to others? Let me just say, the DBE is a very large system. And if you compare 700,000 candidates with 11,000 candidates, for example, in the IB, and 2,000 in Sakai, there's a different level of complexity. It's not about the quality. There are many more things that you have to take into account. So the fact that the results of the one traditionally is higher than the other is no indication of the quality of the effort. Yeah. And I don't think universities look at candidates that way, having been a part of the university system myself. I don't think that students are being discriminated based on the assessment body that conducted the examinations. That's all I can say.
No, thank you very much, Prof. What is important for us to note is the fact that the NSC is based on the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statement that has been signed off by the Minister of Basic Education, Mayor Njimi. Whether you do it with Sakai, IEB, or DBE, you are doing the same caps. And also what is important is that finally it is Umalusi that gives the stamp of approval for all the question papers. Same external moderators for all assessment bodies. When you talk about accounting, it will be the same external moderators who are checking whether the assessment bodies are adhering to the caps. Very important to note. After completing the qualification, nobody gets a DBE certificate or a Sakai certificate or an IEB certificate. They get one certificate from Umalusi as a quality assurer. I think that is very important to note. One other thing that we need to note is that our constitution allows everybody in the country to establish an education institution. I'm going to read you section 29.3 of our constitution. It reads as follows. Everyone has the right to establish and maintain at their own expense independent educational institutions that do not discriminate on the basis of race, are registered with the state, maintain standards that are not inferior to standards at comparable public educational institutions. So immediately you say, close these independent assessment bodies, close the independent schools, you'll be flouting the principles propounded in the Constitution. The Constitution protects those institutions. The standard bearer is Umalusi, nobody else. It is Umalusi that is the standard bearer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, I'm not sure whether there's anybody who still wants to say something, but it will be strictly the last chance now. I'm being sympathetic because it's the beginning of 2020. Lady, please, fire away. Thanks.
I wanted to ask in terms of course, this year there was a shortage in markers. Now, part of the DBE's long-term plan is to have electronic marking. So I wanted to find out with Umalusi, do you think that is something that is going to assist with the program, and also would it not also start creating systematic irregularities when it comes to marking maybe?
Good question. You want to start? Yeah. Is there any other question?
Any other question? Going once? Going twice? It's gone. Thank you very much.
E-marking is the way to go. We have done some benchmarking with our neighbors in Zimbabwe, ZIMSEC, and we have sent officials from Umalusi to go and observe how e-marking is conducted. That is the way to go. However, we are not able to preempt the kind of challenges that we may face as South Africa, looking at our context. It may succeed in Zim, but it may not necessarily succeed in South Africa. So as things stand, we are not able to preempt what kind of challenges we could have with e-marking. Maybe just to illustrate one or two learnings that we had when we sent our officials to Zimbabwe. What is helpful with e-marking is that when I mark the scripts, I do not know from which province they are. The allocation of scripts, so that where we have provincialized kind of arrangement at the moment, with e-marking, I'll be able to mark in the comfort of my home. There will be a camera attached to my computer that checks that I do the right things, and therefore I'll not be marking my province, Gauteng, for instance. If I stay in Gauteng, I could be marking a student from the Eastern Cape, from the Western Cape, even without knowing. What is also critical with e-marking is that as you mark, the computer is able to stop you to say you're not doing the right thing, and that you need some extra training. And that information will flash with your supervisor, wherever he is, to say, contact this person, he's struggling with marking this question, he's not marking it accurately. That is the way to go. I would want to propose that we go that route. However, the costs of rolling out e-marking, the costs are huge. And I'm not sure whether the department will be able to implement this in the short term, or it will be a long-term kind of project. But those are some of the highlights. And as to the kind of challenges that we'll get out of e-marking, I'm not able to preempt the challenges. We'll be able to say once it is implemented in our country.
Yeah. Thank you. I think Dr. Rakometsi has covered it. We have to just take into account that the way we do examinations, and particularly the NSC, has a long tradition going back to 1910. So we can't just change suddenly. You know, if a ship is sailing, you want to make a U-turn, you have to make a Y-turn. You can't just make a UE. So Dr. Rakometsi has covered it. There are advantages. And I want to say it is in the discourse of the DBE. They have raised the issue of e-marking. It's not that they are not thinking of it, but they're approaching this very cautiously. It will reduce, it may, as Dr. Rakometsi says, have a once-off developmental cost to get the system going. But in the long term, it will save money, because you have to take into account the number of markers, and they have to be moved to this center and that center. They have to be accommodated. They have to be fed. All adds up. And all of that gets eliminated when you do e-marking, besides the other advantages as pointed out. So I'm sure that we're going to move in that direction. The world is moving in that direction. Our SADC countries have already adopted that. We are big, and so we need to just not run national experiments. We have to be sure that we're doing the right thing. So we have to go step by step.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll now hand over to Mr. Duncan Angel to make the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Lucky, CEO and Chairperson. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got the pleasant task now. Thank you very much of extending appreciation to all members of the media here today. For some of you, perhaps the year barely started. For Umalusi, of course, it's the end of a very busy period, but we really do appreciate your presence here today. And also the interest you've shown, the questions you've asked, thank you very much, and we will ensure that you do get a full copy of the statement before you leave. Chair, when I arrived, I got here a bit early, and I noticed all the biscuits were already gone, so I presume journalists were here. I'm therefore happy to invite you all. Please join us for a light lunch outside. Thank you very much for being here. Have I made enemies, you know?
We're not bad.
How are you doing? Yeah, very good. Yeah, you've changed. I have. Yeah. Can we have a one-on-one somewhere outside? Yeah, from you. Yes. Okay. Okay, let's just sit over there. So I can go. I want to try